new generation EU actually is by far more ambitious. It's call for recovery and reform for green, digital, and resilient future. And it's the size of 700 billion euro, plus budgets that will come later on, perhaps to strengthen it. But today's discussion have been only about money. Well, I would just give an anecdotal experience from my country. Well, the report after President von der Leyen announced the package was, okay, we will get 3 billion. Well, finance minister previously said only 1 billion, so it's good package. But there was not so much discovery, what is in, what is really what we could expect for it. And Director-General, so that's what exactly my question is. What to expect from this plan focusing on energy sector? And welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Andres. It's a pleasure to see you again, even at a distance. Apologies also, I had technical issues logging in, but I'm in, so it's very good. It's good to have this opportunity, and it's good to see you. Unfortunately, it's a virtual event rather than a live event, so I'm in Brussels and not in the beautiful city of Florence. Like many others, you're sitting probably different places around Europe. But a good morning from Brussels to everyone who is listening in today and participating in this webinar. First of all, a thanks to you, Andres, for organizing this event and for asking me to join. I am very happy with the invitation. As you rightly said, there has been more focus on the amounts, and that's normal, but let's also start talking about the substance. What is it we plan to do with the recovery package? What can we do, and what can we do in particular in energy markets to bring about the Green Deal and to strengthen the resilience of the energy sector? So I'm very, very happy to have that opportunity. I'm happy to have the opportunity here with the Florence School. We have a close cooperation. We benefit from the training you organize at the Florence School, also for our staff in DG Ener. So it's good for me. I haven't been to the Florence School in person yet, but I look forward to doing that. And then, of course, it's nice to see you, Andres. You have been Energy Commissioner yourself, among other things, and a very successful one at that. So I think we still benefit from a lot of the things you started in your term as Energy Commissioner here in Brussels. And an interesting fact, I think, around that is, of course, that at that time, you were Energy Commissioner during the financial crisis. So you have yourself experienced the issues around crisis and the impact on the energy sector, resilience of the energy sector, and how to build again. So I would like to say a bit about that today, say something about the crisis, its impact, what is in the recovery package, the next generation EU that you referred to, and what does that mean for the energy sector in particular. So first of all, on the current crisis, we are seeing an unprecedented crisis, and a crisis of a different nature from what we've seen before. I think one of the positive things we have learned over these last 3 to 4 months is that the energy sector in Europe is fairly resilient. We have managed to keep the energy sector going. I think that the transmission system operators, national authorities, industry have engaged and have proven both resilient, and I'm impressed by that also in terms of simply staff going to work when that is required in different parts of Europe. So I think that's the positive message is that energy security has been maintained, and that the sector is fairly resilient. When we then have taken care of those immediate issues, the next question is then, of course, well, recovery. How do we get out of the crisis, and what will that mean for the energy sector? What can we do? What do we need to do for the energy sector? From the beginning of this Commission mandate, President Ursula von der Leyen has made it very clear that the European Green Deal, making Europe climate neutral by 2050, is the priority of the European Union now and of the European Commission now. And that means putting the fight against climate change at the center of the agenda and involving all different policy instruments and areas to help achieve that. It means, for example, in the field of environment, to address biodiversity loss, we are looking at the circular economy, we have a new industrial strategy. And then, of course, there is an important role for energy policy, by the fact in particular that energy represents about 75% of European greenhouse gas emissions, either by production or by consumption. So in other words, to become climate neutral by 2050, we need to address energy and we need to make good use of our energy policy instruments. Now, this Green Deal is also a growth strategy in itself. How do we grow from the green transition? How do we make use of, how do we strengthen European competitiveness? How do we build a European resilient and competitive industry, also in clean and green technologies to help this transition? And so in that sense, the Green Deal is also a very useful foundation and starting point for the recovery that we are now engaging in. And the Green Deal, as you also said, is placed centrally in that. Now, I said that the energy sector has managed well through the crisis, and it has, because it's proven resilient and secure. Having said that, there is a significant impact on the energy sector, and I just want to make sure that we are all aware of that. Within the European Union, the International Energy Agency has predicted that energy demand in 2020 will fall around 10% compared to 2019. Obviously, the actual drop depends on how will the crisis develop, when do we reopen our societies and our economy fully. It looks a lot better now than it did a few weeks ago, but we're not through this yet. That impact, if we say there would be a drop of 10%, that would be more or less double the impact from the financial crisis that you were energy commissioner and lived through. So a really significant impact. And you will have seen difficulties in the energy sector, very significant price drops, but also, unfortunately, a fall in energy-related investment relating to the crisis. So those are some of the issues that we will have to address also as our recovery package. So the economic recovery package was adopted last week by the European Commission. And as you said, Andries, it is about the next generation who will inherit, so to say, the crisis and inherit the impact of the crisis, and for whom we need to make sure that we recover and that we do it in the right way. So it's entitled Europe's Moment, Repair and Prepare for the Next Generation, and it aims to stimulate economic recovery across the European Union to respond to the current crisis and to make sure that the recovery brings everyone on board, that we don't see too significant divergences within the European Union. This is important because the crisis has not hit everyone equally. Some have been affected more seriously than others, both in terms of health, but as a result of that, also in terms of the economy. What has been outlined from the start is that the recovery package, and you said that as well, Andries, should be green, so aligned with the Green Deal and the Green Deal objectives. It should be digital, aligned with the digital strategy of the European Union, bringing us out in the forefront also on the digital economy. And then it should be resilient, so preparing our economy and our industry and our markets also for the future to be resilient. In concrete terms, the package has two key elements. First of all, there is the emergency next generation EU instrument of 750 billion, which aims to boost the financial firepower of the EU budget with funds raised on financial markets. That will be channeled through EU programs to underpin immediate measures to protect livelihoods, get the economy going, foster sustainable and resilient growth, and help bring about investments. The second part is the larger part of the package, and that's the reinforced multi-annual financial framework for 2021-27. This was already proposed earlier, but now there is a revision to that to take into account the changed circumstances. And again, here the aim is to channel investment where it's needed the most, to do that quickly, to reinforce the European single market, step up cooperation in areas around health and crisis management, which have not had much attention previously, and of course equip the European Union with a long-term budget to drive green and digital transition, to build a fairer and more resilient economy in the European Union. These different elements together with the measures already adopted in the April European Council, provide together a 1.85 trillion of targeted and front-loading support to Europe's recovery. So those are the amounts, as you said, Andries, but also a bit about how they're framed and what are the overall objectives of these important recovery instruments and financial mechanisms to bring us there. Now, in the field of energy, I mentioned the emphasis on green and the alignment with the European Green Deal objectives and work programme. And the recovery indeed does confirm that energy policy, and specifically the clean green energy, is a cornerstone of our recovery. And I would like to say a bit about some of the key policy initiatives that will now be part of the recovery and hopefully contribute to the recovery. There are three aspects I would mention. One is building renovations. The second is the rollout and the scaling up of renewable energy generation or renewable electricity generation. And the third is energy system integration, which is another important policy initiative that we are working on. Now, first, building renovation. We are scheduled to present a renovation wave initiative after the summer, hopefully at the end of September, which will aim to address the obstacles that we see in the area of building renovation. The reason we do that is, of course, energy efficiency. The European building mass is not particularly energy efficient, and it consumes significant amounts of energy and represents a very important share of our greenhouse gas emissions. So if we can renovate our building stock, both private building, housing, but also public buildings, schools, hospital, public administrations, we can bring down our energy consumption significantly and also decrease the level of greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. So we have here an initiative that can have a real impact, both economically, but also in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And it's also a sector, the renovation sector is also a sector that is labor intensive, and one that would typically engage local companies across all member states and across all regions in member states. So an initiative that is well placed to also bring convergence and a fair and sustainable recovery of the European Union throughout. So we're looking at what are the barriers to renovation, what are the barriers that we can help address at European level, how do we bring investment to the sector of renovation, how do we make sure that we have the right regulation in place to boost this renovation wave. It also links into, I said, the labor market. There's significant employment opportunities, and therefore it also links into the European skills agenda, which will be launched in July to improve skills, because we do need specialized skills in the renovation sector, and in particular from an energy efficiency perspective. So that initiative is one of the key pillars of the energy side of recovery, one that can bring about investment, growth, employment, and hopefully also boost European competitiveness and resilience in these important sectors, both renovation itself, but also the green technologies that are related to energy efficiency of buildings. The second pillar that I would want to mention of energy policy and recovery, as I said, is that of renewables, scaling up of renewable generation capacity in Europe. Most of what is already there is renewable and already has considerable support from the European budget and the European Investment Bank. So there are some instruments already available and being put to good use. This is emphasized further with the future loan guarantee scheme InvestEU. It replaces the current EFSI, which will help create further investment opportunities, further funding opportunities, also in the renewable sector. In addition to the renewable generation sector, we are looking also at the renewable industrial ecosystem, so the value chains, because this is this is considered one of the strategic value chains that will be relevant for both for the green transition, but again also for the resilience of the European economy. And what we have seen during the crisis is that some of the manufacturing value chain, some of the renewable ecosystem has come under pressure because of the global nature of the crisis. And so we need to look at what is the best way to make that more resilient for the future, to ensure we have both the manufacturing, but also everything that is related to generation of renewable energy. Linked to this, we are working on an offshore renewable energy strategy, which should come out towards the end of this year, where we look at what do we need to do, what are the measures that should be taken both at European level, but of course also at national levels, for us to generally scale up significantly renewable energy offshore, because to get to the scale that is needed to become climate neutral in 2050 and to lower our emissions by 2030 as envisaged, we need to scale up significantly the renewable energy generation, and to that scale can best be achieved offshore. So our strategy looks at that and includes a number of different actions to get there. The third point I wanted to mention is the energy system integration strategy and the hydrogen strategy that will accompany the energy system integration strategy. Energy system integration is also referred to as sector integration, is an approach that looks at the energy system as a whole and that makes better use of all the different elements that are there. Instead of looking at electricity and gas, we look also at the link between electricity and gas sectors. We look at storage, we look at heating and cooling, we look at energy efficiency, we look at waste, and we look at all the industrial components to see, well, how can we, if we link the system together, how can we make better use of the different components to limit the waste, to become more energy efficient, and to decarbonize all sectors of the economy. Hydrogen is expected to play a role in particular in relation to sectors that are otherwise hard to decarbonize. So there are some industrial sectors, some energy intensive industrial sectors where companies are currently looking at hydrogen as a potential way to decarbonize. And that's one of the things that we are picking up in our hydrogen strategy, which is scheduled for adoption sometime before the summer. So bringing together different sectors of the economy, different energy sources, different aspects of energy with both transport and industry, agriculture, but of course also a better grid interconnections and more digitalization of the energy sector. So those are the three key initiatives I wanted to mention that are directly related to recovery. There are of course others and more that will be done, and I'm happy to cover either more about any of these three or other aspects in the discussion. Now, I made reference to national measures and member states, and I think it is important to underline 2 points here. One is that, of course, the actual spending of the funds, the actual projects and the planning, a lot of that is done at national level. So how this will land and what the projects will look like, what the plans will look like, are of course very, very closely linked into decisions of national government, to planning of national government around each their energy mix, their energy systems. We provide the framework, we make sure we have the right regulation at European level, but then putting it in place and making the choices, the prioritization, a lot of that is done at national level. So there's a key role for member state governments also in this field. And the second point I wanted to mention here is the National Energy and Climate Plan that each member state has drawn up, which sets a path towards reaching the 2030 objectives, and which therefore also become very important in the recovery linked to the green transition. So a close cooperation with member states, and as well, of course, also with the European Parliament. So a very interesting recovery package, a very ambitious recovery package, historic in its scale, historic in its use of the various financial instruments and the EU budget. And I think a good reception so far. There's still a lot to be discussed with Council and Parliament, but I'm optimistic that we are on the right track to launch this recovery and to do it in a way that supports the green transition and supports growth and jobs for a more sustainable and fair European economy. So this is kind of an outline of the main elements in the energy sector. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I think we have a bit of time, despite, I don't know if we have time for a few questions, Andres. Thank you.
For sure. Perhaps I will go in a way that you will have plenty of questions, and not plenty, but we have followed this time a bit different strategy. We asked people to submit questions in advance. So I put these questions, and then I will take two direct questions. We will try now also to give the faces to the question where possible. So the main questions that we got is definitely hydrogen. A blue, green hydrogen, that I would say is number one. The second, I would say, do you expect direct support to renewable energy projects where final investments decisions should be made? Then there is very interesting question coming from Mr. Konoplyanik about working with Russia for example, from hydrogen from pyrolysis. But I would like also to get some direct questions. Tim Skitikate also wants to ask a very important question, in my opinion, that cuts all across the sector. Tim, please.
Thank you, Andries, and thank you, Ms. Jørgensen, for doing this talk. So the last point was about sector integration. And if I hypothetically would build a house and I decide whether to install a gas boiler or a heat pump, often my decision will be driven by taxes, because taxation on different energy carriers, they differ a lot. And often electricity in many countries, they are, let's say, disadvantaged because many levies and taxes from subsidies are recovered through consumption of electricity. So one of the ideas of one of the actions within the Green Deal is the revision of the Energy Tax Directive. So I was wondering, how far can you go at European level, and how is this impacted by this current crisis? Because one way to solve it is just to recover these subsidies through the general state budget, but these budgets are already tight. So what do you think? And also pushing it to other energy carriers might create some kind of fairness issues, because some people might have installed a gas boiler and didn't expect suddenly the cost to go up. So thank you.
And then I think the overall themes that goes all the time, it is a costs versus transition. So are not the costs too high? So I think that is a main preoccupations that I hear all the time. Yes, we agree we need to get where Green Deal should bring us. That is not question, but all the time is a question of costs and, well, also time constraints. So I think now, Director General, you got quite a lot of questions. If we will have time, we will use another part of our opportunity, but it's not the last meeting as well. So please, I know that you have time constraints, so go ahead, pick the questions that you would like to answer from the palette I gave to you.
Great, thank you very much, Andries, and thank you very much, Tim, for the good question. I will start with your question, Tim, because it is a key point. As you said, we have decided as part of the European Green Deal that we will address energy taxation. It is not an easy issue to address because it requires unanimity, because the way the energy taxes are designed are very much national decisions. And so we will do what we can at European level, including with the proposal for the revision of the Energy Taxation Directive, but then it goes into the discussion with member states. You rightly asked, how has the crisis impacted this? And we don't know that yet. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see in the coming 6 months or even in the coming years, when we begin to understand in more detail what is the structural impact of this crisis. We've seen the immediate impact and we've seen the immediate responses, and we're addressing that as part of recovery, but how does it impact some of the broader structural issues, including in the energy sector? And that, I think, will be interesting to see in the discussions. Well, what does that then mean? Does it facilitate our work in these areas? Does it open up new avenues to consider? As you say, that the national taxes and levies are not always conducive to the shifts, for example, to heat pumps that are cleaner than gas boilers. And you made the point about this, the fairness of it, the social aspects of, well, if you just make existing gas boilers or gas more expensive, you hit some consumers hard, and that is not fair. So I would like to make 2 points on that. One is that a just transition is a key element of the Green Deal, and it also addresses your question, Andries, about the costs of the transition. Because of course the costs of the transition are not the same all over Europe. You've got some countries that already have a fairly high level, for example, of renewable electricity generation, a high share of renewable energy in their energy mix. So they are in an easier spot, in a better place, compared to others that rely on coal still, or that are heavily dependent on one gas supply source. And we have to take into account that there are different circumstances. There's different geography, different weather, different infrastructure, simply different stages and different energy markets, and that will be taken into account by the just transition mechanism. that we have proposed as well, which will address what about the areas where this transition is particularly difficult. So that's at the macro level, so to say, helping, for example, coal regions in transition is probably one of the best, or probably the best example there. Then we have a second aspect or policy initiative that I wanted to point to, which is that of energy poverty. We see that in some parts of Europe, energy poverty is a real issue. For some people, energy prices are high compared to their overall income, or energy poverty can also be linked to the fact that buildings are not energy efficient. So if you live in an apartment that is not well insulated, it will be much more expensive, of course, to heat it. There will be a lot of waste heat, and that will cost more money. So energy poverty is another aspect that we are addressing, working, of course, with member states, because it's, again, a fairly local issue in some ways. But what can we do at European level to address energy poverty? And as I said, it links into also the energy efficiency of buildings. So we hope that the Renovation Wave initiative is also a way to help improve the situation for some of the energy poor. It's not everyone where energy efficiency is the answer, but in many parts of Europe, and for many people, it is a real question or it's a real issue that can be addressed by Renovation Wave. So a lot is happening on the fairness of the transition, and as I said, on the convergence across Europe. But I'm glad you raised the issue, because it is central to the Green Deal. And you raised the issue of hydrogen, which I'm glad you did, because I think there's a lot of talk and interest in hydrogen. We sense a lot of interest in the forthcoming hydrogen strategy, which is currently in public consultation with the roadmap, and the question of blue versus green hydrogen. So in the hydrogen currently used in the European Union, most of it is gray. So there's very little hydrogen in our energy system at the moment. Most of it is gray, and so it has high levels of carbon greenhouse gas emissions linked to it. We need to change that, and we need to make better use of hydrogen and more use of hydrogen, but it has to be decarbonized hydrogen. The longer term objective, the objective of the hydrogen strategy, is to support and strengthen and increase the share of renewable hydrogen, so what we also refer to as green hydrogen, which is hydrogen based on renewable electricity going through electrolysis and therefore becoming what we call green hydrogen. And that's the objective. What we can see is that it will take some time to get there, because it will require, as I said earlier, also a significant scaling up of renewable electricity generation. So this is not for tomorrow. This is a strategy over the coming years to bring us there. Currently, what we call blue hydrogen, so hydrogen based, for example, on natural gas that has then been decarbonized by carbon capture and storage or use, that has fairly low levels of CO2 at the end of it. At least the product has been decarbonized, and it is cheaper currently than the green hydrogen. And so the expectation is that blue hydrogen will play an important role in the early phases in the transition, to help create a market, to help establish supply, but also to make to strengthen demand, to get a hydrogen economy or hydrogen market going in the transition, and then over time shift to more green hydrogen as the overall political objective. So that's what we're working on at the moment, and that balance, I think we'll see that develop over time. We need to look at it as a path, as a trajectory towards our carbon neutral or climate neutral Europe in 2050. You asked a question about the renewable energy projects and if they will benefit from funding. As you know, we already have very significant infrastructure funding available under the Trans-European Network Energy Regulation and under CEF. And what we have seen, and what we expect, is also that there will be a number of renewable energy projects that will benefit from funding under recovery, because they will become part of the green transition. They will become part of the hydrogen strategy, and they are, as I said previously, also well placed in terms of both investment, but also jobs and strengthening the resilience of our economy, of our industrial sector. Then you asked, I think, about cooperation with Russia and work with Russia, which has, of course, been impacted in recent years by the overall political circumstances following the Minsk process, and so the energy cooperation with Russia is at a much lower level than what it has been in the past. The energy dialogue doesn't take place. There's the necessary technical exchanges, but not the formal dialogue resulting from the sanctions that are put in place. But of course, despite this, Russia remains a very significant energy supplier to the European Union. We import Russian gas, we import Russian oil. It's our largest, or has been our largest supplier. There's been a significant shift in gas markets over the past decade, since the crisis in 2009 that you lived through. But Russia remains a very important supplier for the European Union.
Director John, I know that you already overstepped the times that you gave to us, but I hope that we could use you more for this type of video conferences, because I know it takes your time, but it's perhaps less than traveling. So it's appreciated very much that you joined it. I know that all the recovery issues are still in development, definitely, but also we know that the final delivery will be coming from DG Energy, and so we hope to come back to the issues. There have been more issues, but as I mentioned, the main questions, there are a lot of more specific questions, but we will try also to connect with your services and try to get ideas how to deal with this. But there is a lot of, I would say, expectations from European Commission that we will really have this decisive push towards achieving Green Deal. Thank you very much, much appreciated. Thank you for the audience for staying us. I'm sorry that we could not answer all the questions, but well, it is not the last event that we have. Thank you.